previously. It's just they weren't in a concentrated location. And one of the things that happened was there were a lot of shutdowns in terms of services because of COVID, and people tended to gather near where they knew they could get services. And that was in this particular area of downtown. So we thought, since our team, we're all in different locations. I'm in Charlotte, Terrence is in Chicago, Annabuti's in Sweden, and Andrew's in Toronto, that it would be interesting for us to go into our communities and talk to people and find out if there were any common observations or what were the differences. We started out here with some brainstorming. This is from one of our brainstorming sessions. As you can see, just kind of different aspects of it, what mental illness, how that plays into it, racism, discrimination, violence, theft. So we started out with that. And then we went and we each did interviews. I think there were a total of 8 interviews. We reviewed papers, different publications and books and things like that. And then we also did some clustering, like what we did last week in class. We did that here with our interviews. And we found one of the things that was interesting to me anyway was I found that in Charlotte, for example, let me go back for a minute. We thought that what we would do would focus on children in particular, how it affects young children, homelessness. And in the process of doing the interviews, it seems like we kind of ended up in a little bit different direction than what we originally thought. But as part of that, one of the things that I found was that there aren't many services that address the entire family. Either an agency focuses on children 0 to 5, or school age, or teenagers, or adults. And Annabuti found the same thing in Sweden, where there doesn't seem to be a family-based solution. So you just kind of have these disparate services that are offered. Another concern that arose was that there is a reluctance on the part of some people to seek help. And some of that is due to fear of the shelters, of concerns about their safety. And one of the things that I had read was that some people said they, even though like in Charlotte, for example, there are beds, there are shelters where people could go, some of the people that stay in the encampments, they do so because they say we're more visible. People help us more because they see us. So that was one observation. And another thing that we looked at, or that came up, was I noticed that some people, when you talk to them, when they're talking about the people that they help, people experiencing homelessness, some people in the agencies refer to them as clients. And then there was one woman I spoke with that called them her neighbors. And that was just, I don't know, it just kind of led to the idea that there might be a difference in perception of how you perceive the people you're relating to. Would that affect the type of service that you provide, or how does it reflect an attitude that you have towards people you're helping? So that was something that I think might be interesting to explore further. These were some other reflections that we had. I don't think anybody found where there were any COVID cases among people experiencing homelessness.
Sorry,
I'm
Dawn.
sorry.
I think Terrence was trying to say something. I think.
I'm
maybe
sorry. I
he's not
didn't
coming in.
see. Sorry about that. Sorry, Terrence. I'll be quiet now. Sorry
Go ahead,
about that.
Not able to hear Terrence.
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Can anybody hear Terrence's voice?
I can't hear him.
No.
I can hear Terrence.
Yeah, I can't for some reason. I'm not sure.
Terrence, maybe if you just come closer to the mic, if that's possible.
There's just complete silence, actually.
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you clear.
Yeah, I can hear as well.
No, not me. Or maybe
Yeah.
Kyle or Dawn, probably.
No, I can't hear him either. It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's completely silent.
Yeah.
I guess if somebody can just let me know if I need to continue the slide or stop or whatever, because
Okay.
I can't hear him.
All right. Yeah, okay, cool. I might suggest something if we're happy with that. Maybe what we'll do is, Terrence, you can just have a couple of minutes to finish your point, and then we'll hand over to Dawn. And then at the end, if you wanted to add anything else, you can either while Dawn is talking, because I think everyone can hear Dawn. While Dawn is talking, feel free to type it straight into the chat. But I'll also sort of like reserve a few minutes for you as well to sort of share your experiences. How does that sound? Cool.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure where to start because I'm not sure what he was saying.
Sorry, Dawn. Sorry, I think Terrence was trying to talk, so we'll give him a couple of minutes, and then I'll tell you when he's finished.
Sorry.
It's okay. Awesome. Thanks, Terrence. Dawn, over to you.
Okay. This was just, I just had some final reflections. One of the things that a couple of us noted was that there weren't no one we talked to said that they saw any COVID cases among people experiencing homelessness. One result of it, however, was that they were seeing fewer people seeking help than in prior years, but that was really due to the restrictions and remote schooling. For example, there's a law, McKinney-Vento, which guarantees children who are experiencing homelessness have equal access to education. And one of the things that's provided under that law is transportation to school. Well, one way that they can know how many kids are in this situation is by how many are seeking transportation to school. But with everyone doing school online, they didn't need to provide that service. One other thing that I noticed was that one of the people that I spoke with mentioned how she had some positive, a positive outlook in some sense, in that she noticed that some of the people that she worked with had taken the time during this period to further their education. So she had several people that were completing their GEDs, and also a couple that were working to get their nursing certificates. So that was a bright spot. But this same person also is afraid of what's going to happen to people once the eviction moratoriums end, because she says she knows there are several people that are several months behind on their rent. So once the eviction moratoriums have ended, she's afraid they're just going to be flooded with people seeking assistance. So she's been telling people to get all their paperwork ready. She's been trying to prepare people for when this happens. There's also another reflection here about the overwhelming negative perceptions and racial disparities concerning homelessness. And one other here about less support since COVID-19, because of a perception that this, I think, was from Anna Buti in Sweden. There's a perception there that homeless people are more prone to have it, even though from our conversations, that's not the case, but it's a perception. These are just some of the learnings that we had. I'll just speak for myself, and I'll let Terrence give his input. But some of the things that I ran into was just putting aside my own biases and assumptions was more difficult than I thought it would be when forming the interview questions. I found it's, if I could prepare questions ahead of time, then, I was good. But then when you get in those situations where you have somebody that's not as open, and you're trying to come up with alternate questions, it was really, it was difficult for me, because I'm sitting there trying to think, okay, what is another way I can phrase this that will perhaps break the ice? And there was just one person in particular that it wasn't happening. But I just had to, towards the very end, she warmed up and it got a little easier, but there were just some that went better than others. And I just, failed in that instance to find the gold nugget that was really going to work in that situation. But I got through it. And and also there were some restrictions as far as limited time and people being distracted and that sort of thing that kind of affected my interviews. And I apologize, my cat is crying in the back. I hope you can't hear that, but but anyway, that's it for me. I'll mute myself and let if Terrence has anything he'd like to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn, for sharing your experience. Terrence, did you want to add anything, or should we move on to the next group? Awesome. Thanks, Terrence. Team, did you have any questions for that group?
Not necessarily questions, just some comments. It's awesome. I worked in homeless shelters for years, specifically in addictions and youth shelters. It's amazing to hear these stories and empathy that you managed to gather in such a quick time. I really love what you ended on with the stories being part of funding and understanding, working with with homelessness and shelters, it's often a feeling of like, if people could see what I'm seeing right now, then the money would come, and it's just that people aren't. And so it's bridging that gap. And I love the empathy and storytelling within that. Yeah, and the people lying to get services is really interesting. There's I often saw a phenomenon where people who are the best at working the system sometimes get the benefits out of the system, whereas people who, for example, have extreme mental health difficulties, who can't play the system that way, often get left out, and that is a huge challenge. And yeah, people not wanting to be in shelters. That's something else you mentioned. That's a huge issue. Like a lot of the shelters that I worked in, I would not stay in. I would pitch a tent. I would be homeless, be outside of those shelters, and so you know, if that's how I feel, it makes a lot of sense that tons of people would feel that way. So yeah, you brought up some amazing issues, and it's really beautiful to hear the empathy and bias and assumption breaking that you did in really quite a short time with the short interviews. Awesome.
Yeah, +1 to all of that. I really stuck out the rigid systems, being able to game a rigid system. I also worked in a methadone clinic for a while, and got to see there were old pros there, and it was sad to see that people, the people that did well there were the ones that figured out how to game the system. I don't know a better way of putting that, but that is the term, I guess. What I always look for in research like this is the paradoxes, because that's where I think that there's a deeper dive. So the one, it's not exactly a paradox, but the two things that I found in contention from what you guys were talking about that is really interesting to me is that you've got people gaming the system, which is not particularly dignifying at the end of the day. But you also had people that were being referred to as neighbors and clients, which is a great dignifying practice. And so I wonder if there are people that are aware that the system is being gamed and understand how they are, with the position that they're putting people in to work the system. And if that contention is, if people are aware of that paradox. I don't know if that's a question that anyone can answer, but that's what I'm curious about, hearing what you guys are talking about.
Awesome. I think, yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts, Den and Kyle and Terrence. I think it's really interesting sort of like thinking through what are the common things that you see. And it's across every system, right? Like people trying to game the system. And it makes perfect sense if, you know, if people are not getting what they need. If they're not getting what they need, then, you know, they try different tactics. Cool. What we might do is we might hand over, or we will hand over to team one. So that's Pia, Bushan, and Jorge. Pia, I think you're sharing the slides. We'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about the new course and answer any questions.
All right, sounds good. Share my screen.
Awesome, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. We are group 1. I'm presenting second. Our project is Zero Hunger, and we're focusing on Afghanistan, specifically food insecurity and hunger in Afghanistan. That's what we're trying to understand. So before we get into that, I want to introduce our team. I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
So my name is Bhushan, and I have done consulting for UX and usability engineering for large projects, and I have about 15 years of experience in corporate UX leadership and UX research as well. And my main forte is doing user research and user-centered design, and in transforming basically the client expectation into tangible business solutions, which means when you're looking at enterprise apps, what are the kind of user related challenges that they can face going forward. Things like that are answered on my desk, and that's what I've been doing.
Jorge, did you want to go next?
Yeah. So hi, I am Jorge. I'm an industrial designer. I kind of gig a lot of whatever, of anything. I love creativity, so I'm not like an industrial designer per se. So I'm always looking for where can I contribute with my creativity and my experience in whichever project needs a creative point of view. All my skills are, I don't know, between project management, 3D modeling, prototyping, physical, not UX or something like that. I also do emotional research and always wanted to be involved in social entrepreneurship. So this is like the first thing for me to that has something to do with social.
Okay.
So go ahead, Pia. Yeah.
And I'm Pia. I am a recent graduate from the University of Central Florida. I studied computer science and psychology, and I worked in a computer interaction research lab for a while, and that made me wanting to get into UX research. And this is one of the first really big projects that I've worked on outside of school, so it's been really cool learning experience, and I've been happy to work alongside these guys. Now we're going to dive into the actual project. So Zero Hunger is a topic that we picked from the UN's Sustainable Development Goal list, and we specifically chose to focus on Afghanistan. The idea of Zero Hunger is kind of to hone in on countries who have higher margins of hunger and ideate solutions that could reduce those margins. The first thing we did in our process was to kind of write out everything that we knew about the factors that were potentially causing hunger in Afghanistan, just kind of writing down our own hypotheses and theories before actually confirming them. So when we wrote everything out, we started with a systems map and kind of connected everything that we could come up with to see how the actors in this in the complex system that is Afghanistan were related. And then after that, we went on to empathy mapping. And we chose to do empathy mapping next because we thought it would be important to understand the people living in Afghanistan, not just how their environment was affecting them, but also how they were interacting with that environment so that we could better understand how to create a solution that would help them. And then from what we learned from our systems mapping and our empathy mapping, we moved down to a fishbone diagram where we took the topics and the reoccurring themes that we saw and kind of narrowed them down into more concise categories that we could look at in our interviewing process. So the next thing that we went on to, oh, sorry, forgot the slide. So this is the problem that we found, right? The common issues were linked to climate, infrastructure, corruption, and conflict. That's what we got from our deduction from what we knew about Afghanistan from our desktop research. And from there, we took it to our how might we statements. And one of the big ones was how might we get a better understanding of these issues and how they are related. So then we went on to our interviewing process. So before we actually did the interviews, we had to do recruitment, and we started out on Reddit, posting in the Afghanistan subreddit, and that did not work very well. I think we only got like 1 or 2 responses from the subreddit. So we had to move on to doing like Facebook ads to kind of recruit people. And I think overall we got maybe like 8 people who said they would be interested in. And so far we've only been able to actually interview 2 of those 8 people. We've had people think that, oh, actually I'll get into that later. Oh, sorry, got a little bit off topic there. Right, so we did the interviews to kind of corroborate what we thought was happening with what is actually happening. So we interviewed people who actually live in Afghanistan to get a better idea of their perception of what's happening. And these are some of the notes that we took after the interview from the transcript, because we thought writing down what we learned might be a good idea. And then we did this synthesis here. This is actually, Bhushan, do you want to maybe talk about the synthesis?
Yeah, I think this exercise was pretty interesting in some ways. We actually pulled insights out of Benjamin's interview, the first one that we had. I thought it was a very insightful interview that we had. And then to pull out those ideas and to pull out and to then categorize them into clusters was a very interesting exercise, I thought. Secondly, to actually understand what those underlying themes were, for instance, and why we were revisiting those themes again and again. I think much of what we learned before we began the interviews with the people in Afghanistan was validated in this 1 hour session with Benjamin. And so some of the things, like for instance, the corruption in the government, the prevalence of violence in the society, people witnessing bomb blasts and killing of their relatives and so on. Basically, the entire conflict scenario and how it was affecting the farmlands and the infrastructure as well. That was all made very clear in this exercise. And the clusters made it more concise for me to understand what exactly is going through in Afghanistan and why are they sort of facing food insecurity, poverty, etc., etc., and how that is being interlinked with the other things, such as the farming, the entire practice of farming. Why is poppy being grown instead of cash crops, instead of fruits and vegetables? and why do they have to depend upon seasonal crops such as saffron, which is not even a mainstay crop for feeding the poor in Afghanistan. So that actually brought back the whole purpose of the rural economics. How do you sustain your livelihood when you're living in a certain area in Afghanistan, which is to depend upon crops or cash crops like saffron to earn your money during the peak season, and then for the rest of the season you're basically doing nothing, or you're working on other farmlands and or migrating somewhere else and so on. So the bottom line is that Benjamin's interview, and we wanted to validate that in the upcoming interviews, but then we had people not responding, people having different expectations out of this exercise that we were having and so on. So we couldn't move forward with this particular theme. Otherwise, it would have been really great to know what other people think in terms of life in rural areas. What is the kind of infrastructure that they are facing? What are the different kinds of crops that they grow, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so it really was an interesting exercise, so to speak. Back to you, Pia.
Actually, I'm going to pass it to Jorge. His synthesis is next. Jorge, if you want to add anything.
Yes. So this the second interview with our second subject, Abdullah. Well, if you ask me, Afghanistan sounds very alike to Mexico, but I think Mexico has better resources. But they kind of share the same. We kind of share the same problems, corruption. We depend. Well, I think in this case, Afghanistan depends somehow from you have opportunities that are brought from foreigner organizations. But the main, I think what I learned, well, not me, the group from this interview was that maybe the only functioning structure is the family, because this subject, sure, he was talking about how when he was an stable provider for his family, sometimes they approach him to ask for help. So while in Afghanistan we can focus in in the other issues, I think that we can also, in this case, not like not see the small structure that is somehow that is the family. So that when I can like qualify this interview a little bit biased, because this subject, and also we were like setting up like an office there, like a design office or something, I don't know, and he was like hunting for a job. But at the end, I think he kind of gave us a point of view of the situation. So back to you, Pia.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, job scarcity is one of the factors that we learned about during our interviews. Our first interviewee mentioned that there are people in Afghanistan who are working like 12-hour days, and then there are a lot of people who don't have jobs at all. So that makes the job market really competitive. And what happens is that the people who are employed in families usually have to take care of their other family members, and they kind of have a communal living type situation where they are providing for not only their own actual immediate families, but their extended families and sometimes their friends as well. All right, moving on. All right, some of the challenges that we faced during this project so far. Recruitment was difficult, as I mentioned before. And Afghanistan is about 9.5 hours ahead of Bhushan and I, and 8.5 ahead of Jorge. 10.5? 10.5. I did that math backwards. Sorry. And then there was miscommunication between our intentions and what some people thought that we were doing. As Jorge mentioned, a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but a few people thought that they were job interviews and not research study interviews. So they came in with the impression that they had to maintain some kind of like a level of professionalism that I think skewed how they responded to some of our questions. And also there were connectivity issues. One thing that we learned is that Afghanistan has, so there is like one company that kind of controls all of the electricity. And what happens is that they have days, or just like scheduled days where they'll kind of redirect all of the electricity to one part of the country when they're working on something that needs a lot of electricity. So people who aren't in that area have to like be without electricity. And they have alternatives like solar panels, but they're a little bit less reliable. They're not as, the connectivity isn't as stable when you're just using a solar panel as opposed to using the actual electricity. So that made our interviews a little harder. And then some things that we learned. One suggestion that we got that I thought was really interesting was that storage facilities would help farmers be able to sell more of their produce. Because one of our big questions was why some farmers opt to sell poppies instead of food. And, you know, the obvious answer was that poppies are more lucrative. Drug money is going to be more lucrative than food that they can't even sell in their own country because of the difficult terrain in Afghanistan. So what happens a lot of the time is that the food goes bad before it can even get to where they need it to get to, and they end up losing money. So having storage facilities that can keep the food fresh for longer would definitely be an improvement, or would help them be able to produce more for themselves agriculturally. Another factor was the government and the corruption there. We learned in our second interview that people who have closer ties to the government or have a lot of money tend to get their government assistance, like get help from the government more easily than people who don't. And those people are usually in the rural areas because they can't even get to government facilities to ask for help because the terrain in Afghanistan is really difficult to traverse. As I mentioned before, the people who are employed in a family will provide food for the family and their friends because jobs and resources are scarce. PTSD, depression, anxiety, they're all really common. In our second interview, when we asked him what a day in Afghanistan looks like for him, the first thing that he mentioned was bombing and getting robbed and murders. So that was a little bit dark of a note to start on, but it was honest, and a lot of people have PTSD and mental health issues because of that. And then something else that we learned was that the perception of the people that we're interviewing is going to be different based on their backgrounds. And we tried to keep our target audience for these interviews pretty narrow, or not pretty narrow, right? Like we wanted them all to be from Afghanistan, and that was pretty much, or rural Afghanistan, and that was our goal. But then points that were made in our first interview were negated in the second one, and for reasons that I don't, actually, I'm just going to tell you the story. I'm skirting around it and there's no point to that. So in our first interview, the guy mentioned that a group an ethnic minority group, the Hazaras, were experiencing homelessness and hunger at higher rates because they were being persecuted by the Taliban. And then in the second interview, when we asked if there were any ethnic or minority groups being oppressed, the interviewee just said no. And that was the extent of his response to that question. There was no explanation as to why he doesn't think that they were being oppressed or anything like that. He was just like, yeah, no, that doesn't happen. So it's interesting to see, or it was interesting to see how that perception kind of skewed their answers significantly, because the first interviewee had like stories, like he's obviously seen that this happens, but the second was like, yeah, no, this is not a thing. So discerning the difference between reality and perception is something that we're going to have to work on to ensure that we're actually getting the facts of the situation and not just like the biased opinions of a single person. So we're going to have to do more interviews to find out what actually is happening there. I don't know if either of you guys had anything you wanted to add to any of these points.
No, I think you pretty much, no. You've been doing really well.
Okay.
So yeah, so it basically we entered this interview to validate our points and to see whether the persecuted minorities, or the story behind the persecuted minorities and the hunger and the poverty that follows when you are displaced from your traditional lands, whether that story is true or whether we need to add something more or whether it was too far-fetched. What was it? So we're looking towards this person to sort of give us more insights into the story. And to be really already very honest, this thing is going to stick with me for a very long time, because he came in with a set mindset. He was prepared for the answers that he wanted to give us versus allowing us to learn from his stories. And it struck me at that point that you need to approach certain things very cautiously. And one of the things that you should allow your interviewee to do is to give him that space to speak his mind. He or she may not be prepared for giving you the kind of answers or the quality of answers that you expect. Sometimes, and it's a very thankless job sometimes, I feel, being an interviewer, that you have to tweak your expectations. I can personally talk about what I went through. I was really looking forward to this person giving me at least something to take back to my research desk, something that I might have missed out, or something that probably I was biased against. But then he just said no, and that was really heartbreaking. And the kind of these challenges that you face with people, right? Because on one hand, you are trying to learn something from them. On the other, you're not supposed to teach them anything. You're not supposed to create bias in their minds just because you think that something is right because you read it somewhere or because somebody spoke about it. It was a very thin line that we had to tread. And I'm sure it's going to happen again in the future when we go on our lives and we do our own interviews. But yeah, this person gave me at least a heartbreak, to be honest.
How did we phrase the questions that enabled recruitment on Facebook? So Facebook has an ad system. They have certain requirements that they list out, and you, when you meet those requirements, they approve your ad, and you can run it for a few days. So I don't know. We can probably show you the recruitment thing, but I don't have it open right now. I can send it to you in the Slack afterwards if you're curious to see it. And then yeah, So knowing that, I'm not sure how many more people we need to recruit, or because we have like people are starting to respond. We hope to get through those interviews. The goal was to do between 5 and 10. So we're still following up with people to see if they'll actually follow through with the interviews so we can get more data.
Yeah, my question was basically, based on the challenges you'll face with getting recruitment, if there is anything that was learned in terms of, hey, for recruitment, XYZ worked and XYZ ABC did not work, and if we were to do this again, it's not to do it, but if uh, we were to do this again, we would change these parameters.
Oh,
Because I feel
so
finding interviewees is very challenging, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah.
actually there is one part of the story that we missed out. The story is that when we began this project, when we did our research, we realized that rural Afghanistan is more affected in terms of hunger and food insecurity than urban Afghanistan. And our first goal, and we waited forever, our first goal was to recruit people from rural Afghanistan. People who are not necessarily farmers, but people who have had who were witnessing this food insecurity or who had experienced this food insecurity. We waited and waited and we couldn't find it. And then we thought, let's calibrate our expectations and let's look for just somebody who's from Afghanistan. So our first approach was we went to Reddit and we posted a note there in the Afghan groups. There were 2 Afghan groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a response. We got a good response. I will not say the best, but we got some people coming forward and telling us that we will come and we will do this for you. We'll come. And then some people didn't come. Benjamin came from Reddit, and he was an amazing interviewee. But then there was this guy who said, don't look for people in rural Afghanistan because the internet connection over there is very poor. Sometimes they don't have electricity at all. So why don't you just look for people? And I think we had already by then gauged that we'll not find people from rural Afghanistan. But even within the urban areas, our goal was very simple. We just wanted to speak with somebody who's from Afghanistan. It could be someone who's migrated to North America. It could be somebody who's not living in the country in Afghanistan. It's just at the end of the research phase, and we were becoming so nervous about it. We just wanted to speak with someone. And luckily, this Facebook ads thing came up and we found a few people. Some of them came back to us and said, we'll talk, and they didn't come. 2 of them, we had a word, and then one of them gave us very vague responses, like I mentioned to you. So the challenges, I would, in my experience, I would think the challenges were not so much in terms of recruiting people, but in terms of people providing their answers, providing an open-hearted view of what's happening in Afghanistan, because sometimes, I understand that you are from a certain country, you love your country so much that now there's a foreigner who's trying to learn something which is negative about your country, and then you become very protective about it.
Yeah.
I thought that the second interviewee was somebody like that. He was a nationalist, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We were not judging them. We were not saying that because you are facing food insecurity, you guys are poor. No.
Yeah.
Our goal always was to understand and empathize with the situation. And I think somewhere there, I believe personally, I can't speak for the team, but I believe somewhere we did not interpret that message clearly. We had to tell them that this is what it is. We are not here to judge you, but we are here to engage with you. Somewhere that was lost in translation. And I think recruitment per se, I don't think that was so much of a challenge later on, as much as finding people who are very open-hearted about the conditions from their country. This project may have personally affected you, and do you plan to follow through with this? Sorry, go ahead, Sachin.
Did you all pay for the ads on Facebook, or was it just a post in some forum?
No. We paid for the ads. I think it's based on impressions, if I'm not if I'm not wrong, Abram could provide you with more details, but we did pay for those ads. They are not free. Reddit was free.
Yeah,
But then Reddit, but the reach of Reddit, and mind you, Reddit doesn't have so much penetration in Afghanistan.
yeah.
Facebook has a considerable amount of penetration in Afghanistan. So
True.
obviously, the moment we posted that ad, we received something somewhere, I think if I'm not wrong, somewhere around 15 to 14,000 clicks in the first day itself. And I might be underestimating it, but it was a huge number. It was a 5-figure number. And then we were very happy because at Reddit we were not receiving the kind of response that we had expected, and Facebook worked for us.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Kyle is asking, can you say a little more about? Terence is asking, can you say a little more about how this project may have personally affected you, and do you plan to follow through with this or similar research and work? Yeah. So I'll speak about myself personally, because I had this notion about a lot of notions were broken about Afghanistan, but there's this thing that you carry, there's this idea that you carry that Taliban is the only thing that's happening in Afghanistan. Conflict is the only thing that's preventing Afghanistan from moving forward, and development is at a standstill because of Taliban, and so on and so forth. But when we deep dived into the research process, we realized that it's more than Taliban. It's the geographical terrain that's affecting people from development. There's lack of infrastructure, and that's somehow also, I think, related to the terrain, I would say. Then there's corruption. There's widespread corruption, not at the ground level, but also at the government level. There's weather that's affecting. You have certain parts of Afghanistan which are very, very cold, Arctic cold. And there are certain parts of Afghanistan which are very, very hot. And then in the midst of all this, there are these farmers. There are these Taliban factions, religious factions, which are not allowing people to settle down, to do their job. Even if they do their job, they are being threatened and so on. So I admit that when I went into the project, I only had one insight in my mind, and I was pretty sure that was it. There's nothing else to it, but I was so wrong, and I'm glad that I was wrong. So it affected me personally in the sense that it helped me to suspend my own judgment and biases about Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan. That much I could tell you. Whether we are going to carry this research forward, I would love to do this. I would love to carry on finding the interventions, building the hypotheses, creating a solution for Afghanistan. At least that's what I thought was the idea when I began this project. Let's see how much time we have, how much bandwidth we have. I think we're really short because I think Pia's going to move on with her studies. I'm not pretty sure about Jorge. I'm not too sure about what I'm going to do. I have certain engagements lined up. So, but we'll be looking at it. I have one of the things that Jorge has suggested is to create a document of insights, whatever that we've learned, like what Pia's presenting right now, and then we can always revisit it in the future, and then we can always work on it whenever time allows us.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I asked about interviewing was, one, Facebook did not seem, I'm just biased towards Facebook, but I see this is a very awesome side that given their reach, you can do some real good with that product as well. That was insightful to me.
No, absolutely. What was also insightful for me, and sorry I'm adding this late, was that you could do all this. Look at the power of technology. You could do all this sitting at your home. That's thanks to COVID, because if COVID had not happened, we would have all sat here, folded arms, and then we would have said, we can't do this because how do we reach some people in Afghanistan? Because Zoom wasn't there a year back. Only Skype. People only talked about Skype and WhatsApp. But I'm very happy that we pushed ourselves, and also partly thanks to COVID, because otherwise we wouldn't have discovered this group and we wouldn't have discovered Zoom. We now know what our strengths are, and that's partly thanks to technology that we can do a lot than what we set out to do. And to Terence's answer about what the Western media, I think media will always be biased. Always understand that media looks for sensationalism. The one thing that this project has taught me is you go and you find your own sources and you go and find your own facts. I think I see a lot of people on social media saying X or it didn't happen, link or it didn't happen. People are more reliant on links, and that's what the media wants. The media wants to percolate their idea into the society and make you think the way, make you believe the way they are believing the world has to be run in a certain way, or the world is being run in a certain way. I think the best thing to do is to go find your own facts and live by it. If you think that's what it is, suffer if you want, or maybe go out, find a good world, a good idea for yourself and work on it. That's what this project has taught me. And like I said, Taliban conflict, the problems in Afghanistan are much, much beyond that. And it's going to take years and years for people to find a solution for this.
Awesome. Thanks, team. What we might do is we might go onto the course, onto the new course. And then if we have any more questions, we can discuss them after that. How does that sound to everyone?
I think we missed Dan's question in the chat. So Dan asked if we had unlimited funding, how would we approach future advertising for interviews? For one, like a lot of the people that responded to our posts wanted jobs, and if we had unlimited funding, we could give them jobs. Like they seem to have decent enough knowledge on food insecurity in Afghanistan, and I think putting money in their economy might help them. Like that would solve some of the food insecurity in itself, and then we could have access to reliable information on the ground about what's actually happening there to ideate better solutions.
No, I have a different answer to this. I typically make, so what I have done in my entire life is whenever I go on a project, I want to be there, right there in the middle of the battle. And so if I had unlimited funding, I would definitely fly down to Kabul, because there's nothing like you living within the people who are actually suffering. I think when we were speaking with Abraham on the research that he was doing, I think one of his teams actually was in Nepal trying to analyze what the people in Nepal are doing. And nothing beats that you look at people in flesh and blood and you see for yourself what they are doing, and you feel for what it is, and instead of taking all that research back to North America, you actually build your project there in Kabul, because that way you can also validate it with the people that for whom you are developing the solution. So I would have loved to do that, but yeah, it's COVID times. Unlimited funding is not possible. So I would go with what Pia just said.
Yeah, it would be nice to get down on the floor in Afghanistan, but well, yeah, risky because
it would be amazing, right?
That's not
probably kind of scary, but yeah,
scary. It will be amazing. Scary, both. I think that's a really interesting concept. Sachin was just sharing a Japanese concept called Gemba, which I've never heard of. So thanks for sharing.
It's from the Toyota production system.
Kyle is disagreeable.
Yeah, it's very popular in the Fortune 500 world here in the U.S., but I'm not personally a fan. It's more of the assembly line world, which it works great in Toyota's manufacturing plants.
Yeah.
As long as you ignore that people exist in the world, I think it works perfectly.
Yeah. Some of the principles within it are pretty good in itself, if you extract some of them. But overall, as a system, it's basically the whole consulting and book selling. People's dream is to sell the whole Six Sigma Toyota production system, lean and agile and everything. But there are certain parts and bits about them which do make sense, but as a whole, what they sell, the package is just consultant's dream.
That's
It works in manufacturing.
All right. I feel like I learned a lot about food poverty and homelessness in one short hour. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about the new course, which we're calling Taming Complexity with Systems Thinking. And basically, it's to sort of go through and understand the mindsets and tools of a systems thinker, and sort of give you those tools and mindsets to apply in your work, whether that's like your professional work, but also towards specific issues that you're passionate about. And we've got a couple of surprises as well. Any questions before I start off with about the course? Before I sort of introduce it? No questions. All right, feel free to pause me and ask. So I really like this quote from Albert Einstein. He says that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them. And that's sort of the idea with systems thinking. Is like a different approach to thinking about problems and systems, and it helps us sort of understand a broader perspective, or get a broader perspective of the issues that we're focused on, so that we can, we're in a better position to tackle them. H.L. Mencken talks about, for every complex problem, there's an answer that's clear, simple, and wrong. And I really like that, right? Because we often think about like, we should really solve traffic. Okay, how would you solve traffic? Okay, building bigger roads might do it, or incentivizing people to use public transport. It's like, yeah, like people have tried that. There's a reason why it doesn't work. And so that I really sort of resonate, because it's like when we often think about complex problems, it's like very easy to be like, oh, if only we did this, or if only we did that, the problem would be solved. And yeah, there's definitely a reason why these complex problems have been around for a long time, and will probably continue being around unless we sort of, take some serious action towards fixing it. So a bit about systems thinking and why we use it. So the first thing is that it helps us examine problems more completely, right? It helps us look at different perspectives of people experiencing the problem. It helps us understand the relationships in the system, and it helps us ask better questions before we, start jumping to conclusions and taking action. And the other thing is that it helps us broaden our thinking and helps us articulate problems in different ways, right? So homeless is not just about, the service provider and the government and the homeless person. It's also about the people walking past the homeless, or someone experiencing homelessness. And it's, it's about how a homeless person interacts with the services, and, kind of like Terrence and Dawn was saying, in terms of like, there's a lot of complexity, right? And people try to get the best, or, they try to do the best they can with what they have. And the third reason was, around creating and sharing compelling stories that describe how a system works, right? And it's not that, there is one story that we can tell about a system, but it's almost like there's a story that we can tell that we can evolve over time as we test it with more people, which is a really powerful way, right? Because it helps us sort of understand, okay, what are the points that we can intervene in here that we can start experimenting with in order to sort of, see if we can make a difference. So first question, and we can sort of go through this together, is where are you on your journey of tackling complex problems and, using systems thinking to do that? I won't pick names, but it would be good to hear from 2 or 3 people.
Right now, we're still in the interview phase.
Very good. Good answer, Pia. Yeah, hopefully, I'm really hoping your team sort of picks up the Afghanistan work again for the next course, and actually tries to, go through the systems thinking course, to understand what's happening in the system and where can we intervene. Kyle, what were you going to say?
I'm in a weird spot where I'm zooming out I'm zooming in. I dove in and I went after the theory and the philosophy and like, let's get to the deep thinkers on this. And then I realized when I want to evangelize this, I can't just like quote sociologists and ecologists to senior leadership and then have them like absorb something actionable. And the thing is, there's only so much practice in this world, or so much like repeatable practice in this world. So now I'm actually meeting with a few core people and sitting down and talking about some of these fundamentals and saying we need to turn this into a real practice. So we're starting to invent like some new workshops and some new canvases and some new templates and those sort of things.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because I think it's like systems practice is fundamentally, or systems thinking is fundamentally, like it looks different in different ways. You know, it's got the same principles in terms of like prototyping and meeting people to understand and visualizing complex system, but what that actually looks like is completely different depending on the context you're in, and it has to work for the organization that you work in, right? So it can't just be like way out of anything that people are thinking about, because it's like, how, like what's this? Like, why are you telling me about it? So it has to sort of fit into the organization that you're working in.
I'm in an organization that wants a $9 for everything. So they don't want to hear Harry Gilman quotes. They want a $9.
I think I just learned something about you, which is that you're hairy. Yeah, that's interesting, and it's typical of big organizations, right? It's like the way to manage risk in big organizations, just de-risk everything. Sachin, feel free to ask questions now as we go, because I'm sure your questions, other people have them as well.
No, I was resonating with Kyle. It's quick to shoot and then ask questions later.
Oh, okay. All right, good. All right, so the learning outcomes from this course, we're going to cover a few different things. So the first one is, understanding complex systems and how to actually, gain clarity of a complex problem by, visualizing and mapping the complex system that it's about. The second one is talk about or identify specific leverage points in the system. And I think Stanford D School or Stanford Design School calls it system acupuncture, right? Which is like you're trying to find the point in the system where if you intervene, you have like a much bigger impact than other points in the system. So we're going to talk about that. And then the third learning outcome is we're going to, create hypotheses or help you create hypotheses about this change that you want to see in the system and how you can achieve that. And then something that I'm really excited about is, helping us understand our impact, right? And it's not like, we run a 12-month experiment and then understand our impact. It's like, no, how can you actually like understand your impact as the experiment is running? And we've got a guest speaker talking about that as well, in terms of like, how do you create a developmental framework to sort of guide your experimentation as you go along, which is pretty exciting, actually, because, we want to run like real experiments out of this course. Cool. What's included? I think most people know that these things are included, but we'll go through them. So the core course modules, which we get, the weekly sessions, the team project, we met 2 teams presenting their projects today, coaching sessions with the guy that you keep seeing every week, peer coaching sessions, which is something that we've introduced new, which is basically meeting with other teams and sort of talking through your projects and where you're at and getting their help. Community support, and then the certificate, which I think some people are finding pretty helpful. So this is a surprise that we have. We managed to get 2 world-class practitioners of systems thinking. So Thea Snow, she's the director for the Center of Public Impact that comes out of BCG. And basically, she works a lot. She in 2019 she was named Apolitical's one of most influential public sector innovators, and she works closely with government to sort of help them understand what systems thinking is about and help them actually apply it and then get their lessons and sort of share it broadly. Myself, I think everyone here knows me. And then Dr. Shauna Davidson, who's the director of Systems School, and she runs a lot of courses around applying systems thinking across social issues and complex problems. So we'll get to work with her as well. So I'm super, super excited about that. In terms of the course outline, I think we know it's 4 weeks. The first week covers complex systems and liquid problems. What's the difference between the complicated and complex problems? How can we understand that? How can we sort of identify whether we're facing a complicated or complex problems and problem, and then based on that, understand how to actually tackle it. The second and third week I'm going to be running, which is around visualizing complex systems and finding where to intervene, which is around that system acupuncture piece of work. And then finally, Dr. Shauna Davidson is going to talk to us about actually understanding your impact by developing a developmental approach to measuring your impact. Yeah, any questions so far about the course outline or why we're doing it or anything like that? Okay, cool. Feel free to. Oh, Dan, did you have a question? No, you're all good. Okay, cool. So Peter Senge, I think he's like one of my favorite speakers about systems thinking. He says that systems thinking is a discipline for understanding whole. It's a framework for seeing interrelationships rather than just individual things, and for seeing patterns of change rather than seeing snapshots of the system or of the problem. Which I really sort of resonate with, because it's like if we're serious about tackling these complex social issues, we really need to sort of like understand what the patterns are and sort of play around with those patterns in terms of experimenting to see what the impact that we can have is. That's it about the course. I think I'm trying to finish us on time. So yeah, who's got any questions? Dan.
I do have one question. How does this course relate to like tools and technology of understanding systems and data versus the theory behind it?
Yeah, cool, awesome. So I think I would say this this course is really about, rather than just like understanding the mindsets and tools at a high level, it's actually about like putting it to practice. Right. So I think that's the sort of approach that we've been using with all our courses. It's like active learning, right? Learning in teams and actually applying it to a real problem, not just like saying this is how you would do it. It's like, no, actually go and do it and then come back with your questions so we can tackle it. So I would say it's sort of like, yes, it's got theoretical underpinnings, right? In terms of like, this is, how it's applied. This is the theory behind it. But now let's actually sort of apply the theory to a problem that you're passionate about. Does that answer your question?
Partially, I suppose. I guess I was, in a way, trying to understand like tools for collecting big data, like digital data collection tools. If that's a part of the course, or if this is really like understanding systems, I guess, without those tools.
Yeah, cool. So I think it depends. It really depends on the team, right? Because I think some problems will have like big data, right, that you can actually interrogate and sort of build a system picture from, right? Not that's the only source, but big data is an important source. So I think some teams, depending on the problems they pick, they will sort of tackle that specifically, right? Like look at big data that's around a specific problem and pull it into sort of their understanding and create a system map out of that. And then other teams, or that same team will also rely on like interviews or workshops or focus groups and things like that to actually create that system map. So I would say it really depends on the problem and whether there is actually data around that problem, or whether it's just like a problem that we don't have a lot of data around, which is probably unrealistic, to be honest. I think we have a lot of data around lots of problems. So I'd be surprised if a team picked a problem that doesn't have a lot of data on. So it's both quant and qual sort of approach to mapping a system and understanding.
Cool, thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? Far away.
It'll be similar to this.
Sorry, Sachin. Terence was just asking a question, but I'll let you know when I finish answering, and then you can go. Sorry about that. That's really interesting. I think so. I've had reflection sessions with probably everyone that's been doing the last course. I would say there's a few different things. One of them is running. One of them is actually running the peer coaching stuff. The other thing is, I think, getting teams to actually form in week 0 and sort of giving the teams time to come together as a team and understand whether, they like working together, what working together looks like, what they're gonna sort of like agree on as like, what time do we meet, how often do we meet, how do we communicate. So really sort of like using week 0 to form teams and form them in a sort of solid way. And also, I think helping teams plan better so that they don't feel pressured at one point in the course, but rather they feel like they're constantly progressing and constantly getting through the material. I think one thing though to remember, it's like learning is not supposed to be easy. I think, and especially teamwork, right? Like teamwork and learning are not supposed to be easy things. We try to facilitate that as well as we can, but I think the challenges are part of learning. It's okay to have a difficult conversation with the team member. It's okay to take a bit longer time to understand a specific topic or apply it, because that's part of the learning journey. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Terence? Awesome. No worries. Sachin, what was your question? All right. I think maybe Sachin is busy.
Sorry, I couldn't hear Terence at all for some reason. I guess because I called on the phone earlier. My question was, is it going to be similar to this current course where there's hands-on and? Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry, I nodded with that. Yeah, so I think all our courses, what we're really learning from like every course that we run is that like the best thing to get you or to help you learn is to actually give you like a problem, or not give you a problem, but allow you to work on a problem that you're passionate about, because that also, it's a difference between like saying, oh, Dan, can you please do this, focus on this problem? And Dan's like, I don't really care about this problem. I actually care about oceans. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's different. So yeah, definitely it's definitely hands-on. And in week 0, we get the team, as well as form the teams. We also get the teams to decide what topic they're really passionate about and they want to pursue. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Cool, awesome. Sachin's in, awesome. So I just posted the link in the chat if you're interested in sort of joining the next learning journey. It'll be amazing to have you. Now I'm going to hand over to Dan and Kyle, who are going to give us just a few minutes update on what's been happening with our experiments, and then we'll close off. Over to you guys.
Do you have any thoughts, Kyle?
No, I was not expecting that at all. I'll be your hype man.
All right, sounds good. So since we had our ideation session, that was probably a couple months ago now. One of the things that we came upon in order to build our membership with the group is to actually work on real projects with NGOs in real world situations, and so to take these lessons that we're learning and actually apply them. So in talking about how we could get that started, Kyle suggested that we figure out as a group, really we have to visualize ourselves as a consulting agency. So the first step is deciding who we are and what our mission and values is. So we were, what we would like to see is a session at some point where we decide our mission and values as a consulting agency that can then go forth and propose a project to different NGOs. Our dream is to work with either NGOs or organizations that are doing social good, and and like we really have a lot to offer as a group. So we have a huge availability for impact and knowledge and design. It's really just a matter of being able to communicate that. So as part of this session, we figure we could have a 2-hour session like we normally have, but we would also, within that, we would figure out our mission and our values, and we would figure out what we would like to offer, and through that, have an ideation session with people bringing, you say, I volunteered with this NGO and they could use this sort of service, and just really getting ideas, getting a collective understanding and ideation of what we offer. So really working on who we are and what we offer. And ideally we would have a session at some point, whether that's after this next course ends or whenever that happens. We'd like to see that happen, just so we can do. And ultimately, I don't know whether it would be a course, Abraham, or a side project, but just in essence, start a pro bono design consultancy that works on real world problems using all the knowledge that the courses are working on.
Yeah, I think we're in a weird spot, like to put ourselves out there to go fish and connect with some of these organizations. We want to solicit an application that says, here's a problem I'm dealing with, and I don't really understand how to deal with this problem. It's kind of hard to introduce yourself as, I'm a person that solves those problems, but that's kind of what we're trying to do. Kind of at a loss. I was kind of explaining to Dan earlier that when I look at consultant groups and I see their mission statement or what they do, the services they offer, they're usually like out in outer space, like we design the future, that sort of stuff. It's really ham-handed, and somehow they earn clients this way. But when I see community design happening with peers in the service design network, they're doing things like there was a project recently where they were working on domestic violence in South Sudan, and there wasn't a place for there was no community center or no legal advice, and so they had to mask the centers. I don't know how you get connected in those groups. This is what we're attempting to do, but Dan's got the sort of connections, and what we want to do is essentially figure out a way to identify ourselves to get in front of them.
Mm-hmm. And as part of this ideation session, it would be, I know that this group has a collective connections and knowledge, and so really it would be, hey, I volunteered with this organization in college, and I really like that because it is the hands-on, on the ground. I don't know anything about South Sudan or Afghanistan, and so I would hope to get work on projects that someone in the group has firsthand working knowledge with and connections with, and that would be exciting to me, but also just that connection already exists.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Dan and Kyle. I think when I began interacting with Abram, I remember very clearly that I wanted him to understand the value of consulting, because we have the necessary. I'm not sure about the connections. I'm pretty sure the connections are there, but the knowledge is definitely there. The experience is obviously there, and we all have been speaking from our experiences so far, and consulting is the way forward. I think the only glitch I find is between, and I'm sure going forward we're going to be discussing the only glitch is that are we going to go pro bono or are we going to go paid service for these kind of projects? Because we are dealing with people's times, and time does have a cost, right? As far as, because I come from a consulting background, I know for sure that every hour that I work counts, and we have to decide quickly whether it's going to be pro bono or paid service. If we are able to factor that thing out, then I think the rest of the things are very clear about the methodology that we are going to use or the kind of problems that we want to solve. uh, I think geography is not a, as I said, geography is not a limitation for us, since now we are doing Zoom calls and everything. So we can keep the geography aside. We can go anywhere we want. We can be going to South Sudan, or we can be solving problems in Nepal or wherever. But I think what is clearly lacking in the vision state right now for me is to see whether this agency will have some form of a financial, commercial background, or is it going to be completely pro bono? And I'm okay with both. I'm not saying we have to pick one over the other, because there are pro bono consulting agencies even in Toronto that do work on the sidelines, right? So you have people who work full time in the day, and then they do these weekend jobs where they are consulting people for free. But I'm saying we have to decide that, and once, I think that's the only challenge that I find. Otherwise, we all have experience, we all have knowledge, and we are good to go.
Mhm. I'm really interested to hear your coming from a strong consulting background,
Sure.
your thoughts on really like phrasing and wording what we offer, because and that is something, and yeah, I I guess I was assuming pro bono, but if if that's a business model that's not working pro bono, that's also really interesting. But yeah, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on
Yeah. So there are a couple of,
how you phrase consulting, and how you
well,
like even just timeline. Like, are we offering, you know, six sessions over 6 weeks? Are we? I don't know.
right. So Dan, I think let's address the elephant in the room, I would say, because here's the question: why do you need a consultant? Like, why does an NGO require somebody to help them, right? I would assume that an NGO will have the necessary resources. Let's say if there is an NGO that takes care of migrants from conflict zones, obviously they will have necessary counselors and other resources to help them tackle people who come from conflict zones. But then the question you need to ask is, why would this particular agency require somebody like us, somebody like Design for Impact? So there are a couple of factors, one of which is maybe they want somebody, maybe they need an external perspective, right? So we deal with people who come from conflict zones, but what's your take? Because I believe your knowledge of design thinking and systems thinking from across the world, from various countries, has created a knowledge base for you, and we want you to share that experience with us. So why don't you join our team for a certain period and then help us out to bring a fresh perspective to what we are doing? That could be one way of engaging with an external consultant. The other thing is that, let's say you have people who are coming from conflict zones. It's become such a routine affair for agencies or for NGOs that now they think that it's an additional manpower that they need to handle this, while they can look at other priority matters within their organization. Probably they are looking at not just conflict zones, now they're also looking at people from regions where there's hunger. For instance, they are looking for immigrants who are coming from those regions. Their psyche is completely different from people who come from conflict zones. They have done that, they've been there, and now they feel that we need external consultants to handle this while they move on to other priority items. The third thing is, sometimes these NGOs, they have a nice kind of corporate politics that happens within their organizations. Like, I have been to certain companies where there was no lack of talent, no lack of resources, no lack of anything. Oh, however, the only thing that was lacking was that they needed a kind of a leverage to convince the other teams that, listen, what we are doing is the right approach, and this is probably going to help you more than what you think is. So they will get in an expert, like somebody like Design for Impact, let's say, and then they will say, okay, we have this team of consultants who we believe will be able to convince you about what is right and what is wrong. Right. And then there is this, again, there is another factor which I believe is also true about consulting, which is sometimes NGOs or sometimes companies, they lack specialized knowledge. Right. So you have an NGO which will be just dealing with interviews. Okay, so we know what you are. There is a certain bias that we deal with, and so on and so forth. But they really don't have specialized skill. Right. Which so the one thing that I found within this group is that we just don't deal with problems in terms of solutions, but we deal with problems in terms of insights. Right. So every problem, if we go in with a bias, let's say zero hunger, Taliban, end the Taliban, send in more forces. So the Taliban goes away and then we will have food. No, that's not how it works, right? So we stepped in and we said, no, there's conflict. No, there's infrastructure. No, there's everything else. So this requires specialized knowledge. And I think we are, as a group, we are equipped with this specialized knowledge. And I think it makes us better consultants in any of these four cases. Again, I'm relating this to my experience. I'm not suggesting that Design for Impact is made for this, or Design for Impact should be doing this. In my experience, these have been 4 to 5 factors through which I was invited in the group. So, yeah.
Awesome. So I'm just mindful of time, and I appreciate, Bhushan, that you've sort of shared a lot of thoughts, and Sachin, I think, is sharing some thoughts around like being cost neutral. But that's really like the session that we that Kyle and Dan will run. That's really what will be running through in terms of like, what's our vision, what's our values, but also, what do we bring? How can we sort of make sure that it's sustainable, right? And these, is it like a consultancy model? Is it a different model? Is it like a coaching model? What is it, right? And I think, so I think that's sort of like the next session that we'll be running around this. It will be focused on that. Kyle and Dan, what we might do is touch base together and just sort of design like an initial, here's what the session looks like. But if Bhushan and anyone else, if you have some thoughts about what should be included in that session, please send it to Dan or Kyle.
Sure.
And we'll sort of keep that in mind when we're designing the session. And I'm actually like, I really like the conversation because it means people are excited about it. So I'm really looking forward to sort of, what we come up, like version 1, the first prototype, what we come up with, and how we market ourselves.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
I'm really excited by your knowledge and perspective, Bhushan.
Oh, thanks, Dan. And we'll share more insights as we move forward. I would love to speak with you and Kyle as well, because consulting has been my forte. I've always been a consultant, so always ready to help you guys, always.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, team. Looking forward to seeing everyone next week. If you have any questions about the next course, reach out to me on Slack or email. And hopefully we'll have a few more people joining our courses this time around.
Cool. Great job on the presentation, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much.
Thanks.
Here, guys.
Good night or good day.